Okay, glad you guys could make it. We may be small, but we are proud, loud, and excited to go over the questions today. As you can tell, I'm in a good mood. I got a workout in and I'm getting a big Pepsi in. So I am glad to be here with you guys. Let's open in prayer and then we'll go over the questions. God, Heavenly Father, creator of this amazing, breathtaking world, I thank you for these ladies. I thank you for the different gifts you've given them and being able to share with us. I thank you for their ministries and the kids that they're serving, the families they're serving. Lord, I pray that this book gives us direction as we address kids with trauma, as we help families who've experienced trauma. Lord, help us train our teams to be responsive in a loving, kind way. Help us to be understanding rather than quick to anger or to judgment. Lord, help us to be more like Jesus in every way possible. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Awesome. So I love events. So I was really looking forward to reading this chapter. And I think they had some really good ideas. So let's start with question number 1. In the story at the beginning of this chapter, Pastor Chris created weekly events that met the specific needs of the families in the community. Over the next few years, many of these families were fully integrated into the life of the church. Do you think the story would have ended differently if the church had simply passed out flyers for their traditional VBS event each summer? Why or why not?
I absolutely think it would have ended differently. There wasn't VBS only happens once a year, so you can make a connection, but unless you foster that on a regular basis, you wouldn't make connections with those families and have those families integrated into the life of your church. I mean, we do VBS every summer and we get kids that come and they come for VBS and then, that's it, because we don't do a lot of other outreach events and things like that. I liked how he saw a need and met it, and then that was what drew the families, oh, this is a safe place, this is people here care about me and stuff. It reminds me of in the Gospels when Jesus is meeting the physical needs of the people, and food and water and healing and that kind of thing, and then they're ready to listen to his teaching and what he has to say about the Father and stuff like that. And I really like that story. But yeah, it would have been totally different if they had just done the VBS thing.
I was super inspired, encouraged by this story. I think it would have made a huge difference if they would have just passed out flyers. It probably would have ended up on the ground type of thing if they already had a confrontational relationship with the school, even unknowingly. He didn't even know. But I so wish this would happen for us. We've been trying to get into 2 local schools here for the past 2 years, offering them even a free what do you call it? The Epic guys, but not Epic. Oh, who are they? Anyways, the show where the guys come in and do all the crazy fun stuff, and they do stuff on bullying, and it's just a fun show, and we've offered to pay it for them. And they're like, nope, we don't need you guys. And we've even had the company call thinking it's a church calling. They want to push Jesus on us, and nothing. So it's so disheartening that these schools won't let us come in to help them. We want to partner with them and have a relationship with them, and they are just like stone walls. COVID didn't help either, and Michigan people kind of stink once in a while. So yeah, I would love to have this opportunity like this, because I think partnering with schools what's the word? It's awesome. I mean, just the families you'd be able to reach, the relationships you'd be able to build over time, just like he did. He saw a need and he did a practical thing to fill it. And it wasn't just for numbers sake, or, it was truly to, reach these kids and the families. And I love how it became so easy and simple for the families to become more part of the church, not just an event here or there, but truly they were so integrated in so many things. So really, really great story, I thought.
So that company's Remix. So they found themselves in my inbox last week, like, hey, can we come do an event for you? And it's like, I'll add you to my list. But I agree. I think here in Washington, we're one of the most unchurched regions in the world, or in the United States. I don't know, not the world. And the church that I was saved in actually did this huge, extensive research project on outreach and how to get people into church. And they found that it took about 30 engagements with the church before someone would walk through your church doors for the first time. And so the church that I was saved in was really intentional about creating what they called outreach networks. And they were really intentional about being in the community and meeting practical needs in this way. And I mean, the church grew an insane amount. It's still one of the biggest churches in the valley, just because they had this mindset of, we're going to go where the people are, to quote a song. But I think I used to go to a church that was all about we're not called to go into the churches. We're supposed to be separate from the churches and the church or from the schools, and the people need to come to us if they want Jesus. So I actually had a fight to even get permission to send the flyers for VBS to the schools. And so it definitely would have been different if they had a different mentality as far as outreach and meeting a practical need in a practical way.
I think what's really interesting about it is that they didn't go and be like, we want to come in. They just said, what do they need? And they needed something simple. And it didn't involve penetrating the walls. It didn't involve even being in the building. It simply was, we gave them backpacks with stuff in it. And we said, if they need anything else, let us know. And it was a continual showing up when there was a request, because they could have done that as many, I know many churches in our area, they do the backpack thing and we all get our backpacks together and we give them to all these schools. And then we're like, there you go. That's great. But they weren't. They were like, what else do the kids need? So they made note of the one kid needs a coat. They kind of did the hampers thing, and they weren't looking to even be in this school. They were just looking to create a relationship. And I think that that's really important. I think sometimes we get this idea that we have to go in and we have to be present, but the story kind of focuses more on, they started out being the behind the scenes, what are they, Secret Santas, Good Samaritan people, we're just going to give you, we're not expecting anything in return. We're not expecting. And then from there, it became about, well, now they need homework help, and now but they had to develop that trust. And I think in some cases, and it's hard in Canada, our schools, particularly where I am, I can't speak for all of Canada, but for where we are, our schools have really gone on I can't send VBS flyers. I can't send any sort of anything to our schools to be handed out if I want it. So we have two kind of divisions where I am. We have the Catholic, and then we have the public system, and then kind of we have private schools. But I don't think they're anything the equivalent to what you guys have going on down there where I am. But our Christian schools are also then kind of connected to the public school system. They get paid, teachers are paid that way, but they kind of get an exemption and religious stuff. But to get into the Catholic and stuff, you have to go through a long process. If I wanted to bring in, because we were doing a soccer camp, and I said, well, we can come in, we can do a half hour, we'll take over your gym period. We'll just teach soccer skills and give the kids a taste of what camp could be like. And I had to go through a ridiculous amount of hoops and paperwork if I'd wanted to do that. And we didn't realize it took that long, so we did take longer. But I think the big thing is we need to kind of come with that, well, why are they first of all saying no? Is there a past relationship where maybe pastors and churches have tried to get into the school and they shoved their beliefs onto the church and was like, no, if we're going to come, we're doing it our way, and creates that bad taste. Maybe the principal himself or herself have had bad experiences with churches in any sort of circumstance. So to figure out where the relationship is broken first, because they knew like going into that relationship that the pastor before had waged a war. Like, so you don't even attempt to go into those doors because right now you're the hated enemy. And I think we are fighting battles sometimes in the schools where we're not even aware that there's been a hurt that's been caused. And it might not have been by us. It might not even have been by any church in the like surrounding area. It might have been some one-off church that was like, this is what we're going to do. And they just happen to maybe be more of the fanatical side, or what they taught or what they did maybe doesn't align with what the school system. And we have to be cautious of that, because while we have our places, schools do have required teachings and they do have required stuff that they have to teach about, and to go in and to teach against that would be going against what their school stands for. And therefore, like, there's just a lot that we have to be more cautious of. But I love the idea of starting and building that trust before going in and being like, we're going to pay for things and we're going to, well, lots of people don't want the help necessarily. They want, yeah. So that's just my thoughts.
No, I think you're 100% accurate. The Epic guys that I was working with, they were wonderful at pointing that out too, and talked about the importance of the relations, the relational aspect you have with them. And, they had talked about what they like to do is before the kids even get together for their assembly, like the mascot and their team, and even, someone from our church would travel from room to room and just connect with the kids and the teachers real quick. And when just a short of, hey, if there's anything you need, let us know. We'd love to help your school out in any way. And we've tried that as well. It's just really hard to get in. And just like you too, Kristen, like we can't do any flyers or anything like that. Like it's very, separated. And it's not even like we could like stand outside of school after school, then, there's a police presence or a security presence. And obviously we would never want to, cause a scare or anything like that to pass out a flyer. But I think a school is just a great opportunity to really serve families, and connect with the school and build a relationship with them. COVID was our biggest enemy in all of this, because our schools were so closed off after COVID was done. Even this past year is the first time they've started doing assemblies again. But yeah, I'm hoping for the best.
I think part of it too, just to kind of tack onto what Kristen was saying, is that a lot of people have experienced various degrees of church hurt. And a lot of times that is the filter. And, because, teachers are trained, like we are the protectors of the children, and, everybody has to come through us. That almost is their way of protecting kids from experiencing any kind of church hurt that they have experienced too. So, again, just going back to the importance of just meeting the practical need and leaving church out of it and letting Jesus shine through your actions, because the Bible says that we would be known that we belong to Jesus because of the love that we have for others.
There have been a lot of, and I mean, like there are ways around those things. And I mean, one of the ways that our church has been looking, it's been hard, just with everything going on in my life, and schools are crazy busy. You have to pick like the right time to meet, but to go in and to be like, what are the needs of our communities? Because our principals know what their students need. And like, I think that sometimes as a church, we look and we have a fairly good idea, but their students need specific things. And sometimes, like, I think if we have a school that's very transient, but a lot of our families in the area around us are two working parents out in the community. And so, things like before and after care, it might be the thing. We had a church near where I live. Like, I don't live near a church. I'm on the other side of the city. It's our town is small enough you can live on the other side and still get there. But they started a before and after care. And so they would bus kids back and forth from I think we have 4 schools in the area to their building. And it wasn't like church, like it wasn't like a VBS or anything. It was just, we're just meeting this need. And then they also allowed like a preschool and stuff. And I think it can be done in such a way that you'd establish that relationship, that because a lot of people, it's even just getting in the church door. Like churches are a scary place. I know we had a Bible study running for a while that they couldn't meet in the church because people wouldn't come if it was in church, but in a home it was fine. So we kind of have a lot more. I think we're navigating a lot more stuff in terms of church trauma and church hurt than maybe those before us. And it trickles down. The kids may not have any hurts, but their parents do, and their grandparents do. And we're having to like repair bridges that we didn't even know were burnt. And it just seems like everybody is walking around with church hurt, and some have been given healthy ways to deal with it, and many have not.
I don't know if this is a common thing or if it's just like this part of Washington that I live in, but we actually have a resource officer at our police department. And the job of the resource officer is to find the needs of the community and then meet the needs of the community. So if we wanted to, like if our church was, I don't go to church in our local town, we drive 40 minutes to church. But if we wanted to get into the school, or if we wanted to offer a resource to the community, we would go to our community resource officer and say, here's the resources that we can provide, whether it's backpacks or bunk beds or whatever it might be. And then it is up to them. So that way, when a need comes up in the community, they go to that resource officer to fill that need. So that might be a way to say, here's some, what are some of the practical needs that people have in the community? And they can give you a list of the people that need a Thanksgiving dinner, or they can give you a list of kids who have a parent in prison, for Christmas gifts or whatever, and just be able to, can we provide hot chocolate for the parents, on a, last Friday of the month or whatever. Then they might be able to have a little bit more of a pull in a different direction, to where it's like, you're not coming in as a church, you're coming in as somebody who just wants to meet a need.
These are great. All right, so how much do you know about the children God has called you to serve? Where do they live? How do they get around town? Where do they go to school? What do they do for fun? Do they have a relationship with God? Are their parents active in your church? How well off are the families financially? What are the biggest physical and emotional needs right now? How do the answers to these questions influence the way you select and execute special events? A lot of questions.
If I answer the first question, just limited to the children in the church in which I serve, I know a lot about them. I know where they live. I know how they get around. I know where they go to school. I kind of know what some of them like to do for fun. A lot of them do have a relationship with God. Their parents are active. We live in a suburb of Minneapolis, a western suburb of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and the city is 26,000 people, and it's a pretty middle income neighborhood. As far as their biggest physical and emotional needs, I don't know, like we haven't had any families that have needed like physical help with anything, or like clothes or food or stuff like that. And I think the kids are okay. I mean, I'm not digging into that like with their parents and stuff, but emotionally, like when I'm with them for 15 minutes on Sunday mornings, they seem to be okay. I was talking last week or 2 weeks ago about the Love Inc., Love in the Name of Christ organization that we have here in our town, and it's all the churches partner together through Love Inc. And there's a church that does a backpack drive, there's a winter coat drive, there's food drives. We just had a March food drive, and we collected 500 pounds of food for the food shelf at our church, which was really, really fun. And so I don't know a lot about the kids that live in the neighborhoods surrounding our church. that's something that I've thought about for a while, and getting into the schools, like, how can I have outreach? You know, there's the 2 middle schools, a Spanish immersion school, and an elementary school, and the high school are all within like a mile or 2 of our church. So there's no excuse for us not to be getting in there, and a lot of our kids that come go to those churches. Um, and that's one of those things that I've been thinking about for a while. How can we better know the kids in our community that don't come to church, and how can we have a relationship with them? And I don't have the answers yet, but it's something I've been thinking about. But as far as like the special events that I do for our children's ministry, it's pretty much just geared towards um the kids that come. There, except for VBS, it's not geared towards the community. We do have a church-wide event that we did last summer, in August on a Sunday. We had the Lack Family Band from California come, and we put up this huge tent, and we called it Valley Fest. Our church is named Valley Free Church. And we had 2 bounce houses, we had a petting zoo, we had 2 food trucks of live music, some other stuff. And we had like, it was our first year, and I think we had like 400 people from the community come, which was way more than we thought. And we're doing it again this summer, and I'm hopeful that like the word spread, and people remember it, and, oh yeah, let's go check this out, and there'll be more of a outreach. But as far as like people that came back to our church because they came to this fun thing, one family, and they're a family that I met, and it's not even the family, it's the grandma, and she's tries to bring her 2 youngest grandchildren every Sunday. And it's a family that used to go to church, is not going to church because there was church hurt at the church that they had been going to, so they stopped going. So the grandma's coming regularly and has really connected, but that was kind of disappointing. There weren't more connections made. And a lot of people in our area go to church. So even when you have kids that come from outside the church to VBS and stuff like that, they're already churched somewhere else. So as much as we try to like advertise and invite anybody to come, we tend to pull only from mostly religious families. So those questions made me really think a lot about better questions that I should be asking about kids in the community and things like that. So that was challenging to me.
I feel like the first set of questions I could answer pretty strongly. We still have a pretty small kids ministry, so I know all the kids really well. But one of the things that I was thinking about during the last question as well is that like a few months ago, I read When Helping Hurts. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but it's really good. For me, it's really influential because I'm primarily serving a community that I don't really relate to. Like I grew up with 2 parents, middle class. For the most part, my mom was able to stay home when we were kids, and then she got a job when we were older, but like, very stable home in a small town. And now I'm working in the inner city, primarily with low income families, and of different like racial backgrounds than I am as well. And so in that book, they talk a lot about like, it can be really easy to assume that from the outside, and these things that are good aren't always good gifts. One of the stories they told was about going into a church, going to an apartment complex next to them and giving out Christmas gifts to every family, and how they thought they were doing this great thing. They did it for several years until finally someone from the community was like, these parents are so ashamed and embarrassed when you show up and you take that away from them and you prove that their parents can't give them what they're supposed to be giving them, and the church can do it and they can't. And so instead of this really, like from the church perspective, they're like, of course we're doing something kind. From the community perspective, they were not seeing it that way. And so they redesigned how they did it, and like, just involving community members who are actually in the community and to what those needs are, instead of assuming. which is just challenging for me as kind of a control freak who thinks they know best, and like having to let go of some of that control and truly embrace people, like, and also, you know, some of the stereotypes or mentality I have that I have to get over, of thinking like, oh, this person doesn't really know what they're talking about because they can't keep a home, they can't keep a job. And so like having to get over my own pride and being like, why do I think I know what they need best? But I read that book maybe like a year ago, and I still am struggling with the concepts I read in it and still don't really know what the answers are.
In my world, so I got to know our kids. Like, we're a fairly small church, and the way that our people are is we're from all over the city. So actually very few of our kids are from directly around our church. When they built our church, they did so with a big vision of like being a community surrounded by in the heart of the community. And it actually, we ended up being on like the outskirts of the community, and we have like a major road right beside us, just on the other side, like we're in a business-y part of the street. And then there's a massive road, and then there's this massive community, which is who they'd hoped to like build into, except parents don't really want their kids to walk across major streets. It's just a thing. And our neighborhood is actually fairly small, or not small, sorry, old. They're old. I remember I went canvassing for sport, like soccer camp, and I was like, I'm just gonna go walk the neighborhood, see. And I start talking to some of the people that live there, and they're like, yeah, there's one baby down the street. We're all retired, all of our kids, like, because they're still original homeowners who have been there for 30 years. And so that changed things. And then also recognizing our families are kind of middle class. We do have like both ends. We have, like I had shared before, we have a lot of new Canadians and stuff, but in how much I did, at one point we were running really consistently. And then right before COVID, I was like, I need helpers and I need parents to show up because I can't get anybody else. And when I canceled it, nobody was really upset. And I get the occasional, like, are you going to run a program? But for the number of kids that were coming, it's like 2 of the 25 are actually concerned about it. And we have a lot of those programs that run within the city. So we kind of scaled things back and started doing a bit more intentional spiritual stuff and providing that kind of resourcing for parents, because that's more what our parents needed. Their kids didn't need another program. And we found that some of our families were going because the church offered it. And there's that mentality that if the church offers it, we need to come, even if it's taking away from like the 1 day a week that we have as a family together. Because our kids are busy with like sports. Some kids are doing like 3 or 4 different sports, and they're in 3 to 4 different, they're running. And so that's where kind of where we kind of fell, and how that kind of started to shape how I kind of do ministry in that sense. And I would love to provide stuff for our community, but recognizing that I think like we do have one school that's nearby that I would love to kind of connect with and get to know a little bit more, but those kids aren't really coming from directly around our church. Like I said, it's a lot of seniors, and the kids are all on the other sides, which makes it a farther walk. And a lot of our families past like a certain point are all apartment buildings. So they don't necessarily have accessibility to transportation, and our bus system sucks horribly. Like, I don't know that there is a bus stop. I think the closest bus stop is like a 5-10 minute walk to where we are. Like it's bad. I don't know. They did not plan the city well for our buses. It's not, it's just not as safe. As a parent, I would be cautious about sending my children to some place that they have to walk that far. So it kind of changes how you do ministry.
We've been getting more and more involved with our community, like literally the folks in our backyard over the past like 2 or 3 years. We read When Helping Hurts, and that's what kind of really kicked off how we reach our community, because we did the whole, Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, and we did all the presents, but it just felt like, give, and we really want people to come into the church, right? We don't want to just be a handout. We want them to have a relationship with Christ. So we've been really working on relationship things over the past 2 years specifically. We, like we partner with our local city on events. So I feel like we're getting to know our community better, but our community is also so vast. Like literally behind, like we share a fence with, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term Section 8 housing. So like it's government paid, people are living there type deal. Like they're literally behind us, and that's who we serve the most. And we've become better at how to serve them. But like literally across the street from them, like there's just a road that runs in between them. And on that side are like humongous colonial homes that are worth, $250,000 to $300,000. Like that's, higher end. So, and then we have, a mobile home park down the street. So like we have so many different types of people that live in our community. So I would say we don't know them all that well yet, but we're working on it. I do feel we're in a spot, like we're in a downtown area, so very busy, and it's something people could walk to. But I don't know, how comfortable parents are about letting their kids walk far distances, or even close distances. I don't know about you guys, but we, creepers are everywhere. And we just had another kid almost picked up the other day in a city just north of us. And it's just happening so much, so often. It's hard to let your kids just walk anywhere, So I think there are a lot of hurdles we have to face. There are a lot of things we need to think through when trying to serve and reach your community. And again, also balancing of not just being a handout for your community either. We really want that relational aspect. We want them to come and know God. We are doing like our VBS. We were doing backyard VBS for the past couple of years. And this year we're transitioning back to our church building. But very much like you, Mary Lou, like all we've been able to serve in the past are churched kids, which I don't want. Like I want to reach our unchurched community in our neighborhood. But we're really trying to brainstorm on how we can, market that. We have like a couple ways we're going to do it, but I just, I want to reach kids for Jesus. And not that church kids, you can't, but, I want other kids to know about God. I don't want to be limited to, stuff in our building. Hopefully that doesn't sound absolutely horrible, but,
I think that there is, and one way that we have found, so like I said, in our city, I'm pretty sure that all our churches that are growing are just because people are leaving old churches. Like that's how it's growing. We don't see a ton of new. But what I've found is that the kids themselves are the best people to bring the unchurched. I can send out millions of flyers and I might get one or two out of the like hundreds I send out, kids that come to a program. We've had a couple families that'll walk in through like a fun event, like a carnival. But the ones that come consistently are the ones that have pre-existing relationships, kind of like you said, Jackie, where it was like 30 encounters with someone, but they're often the really good friends. And I think teaching our children to look outside of their zones, who can you invite? They go to the safe kids, the ones that know Jesus, I'm going to invite them, but getting them to invite the you just never know. Like sometimes those kids, all they want, and I don't remember who it was. I don't remember if it was someone here or it was on some podcast I was listening to where they're like, I just wanted someone to invite me, because they're so scared to go. Like we had talked about earlier, many parents are already hesitant and sketched with the church, and then their kid maybe just wants to go. And we just need to extend the invite, but getting our kids to do it, because I think when we do it, it doesn't have the same feeling. I don't know. I'm one of those people who's like, when I go to a church and the pastor is the only person that talks to me, that says a lot about the church. But when I go to a church and I've like the pastor's like the one person who didn't talk to me, that says something else. And I think that that's kind of that big thing, is in getting our kids to be like, invite your friends, invite your classmates, invite their neighbors. Like if our families get to know the 5 people that surround them or however their houses are situated, that's 5 families. And maybe out of those 5 families, maybe 2 might go to church. Like numbers are not looking great for people who attend church, but it's not going to be that they're going to come to the door immediately. It's going to be that they're going to come to their house. And then they might send their kids to a kid program because their kids are okay and their kids aren't sketchy. So then they're going to send their kids. And then, well, my kid really likes it. Now I have to go watch them perform or sing or come to some wrap up barbecue. and oh, now I met a family, and it's like that. It's like a 4-year long process before the family walks through. And I think we've had a number of families that have come from other religious backgrounds who've come to our church because they had an invested relationship with someone outside of the church context. And I think that that's so important when we think about our kids and what they need, but also getting them to be those speakers, because kids are safe. They're much safer than adults are. If you think about, like, in terms of relationship forming, people aren't going to think too highly of us if we start forming relationships with children to bring them to our church buildings. I was watching, there's some youth pastors who've done like what are explaining the job wrong, like poorly explaining youth pastors' jobs, and they're like, we lure children into our dark church basements. And I'm like, oh, so like, and they had like a whole bunch that were along that line, like just horrible. But that's ultimately what happens when we go to these kids. We're saying, hey, come to a building to visit strangers you don't really know, and come on in. As a parent, that's sketchy.
Same with like the bus ministry. Now, granted, I did bus ministry for years at one church, but like now as a parent myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine sending my kid on a bus with like 50 kids and I don't know anything about the church. Like, at least with school, I know they're going to school where there's, you know, approved teachers, and like it's just intimidating and scary and uncertain. So that was my other thing, is I was reading this chapter and they talked about providing transportation. I'm like, in my area, I don't know, I don't see that being very profitable, or not profitable, bad word, like used much, because I don't know of many parents who would just send their kid without knowing me as a person or anyone in our church, you know?
We provide
Well,
transportation, but we exclusively provide transportation for whole families. So families that the parents don't have vehicles, which helps solve some of that. Solves a lot of issues, actually, because you also don't end up with a kid where you're like, I need to contact their parent now and I don't have their number or whatever. You know, sometimes that can happen with bus ministry.
And I think as church scandals and all of that continue to emerge, like they've kind of been a hot news minute for many opportunities. And it's not just small, it's all over in our small churches, our big churches, but they're becoming much more known. People are becoming more and more skeptical of letting their kids just go. And they're becoming more and more skeptical of things like van ministries or bus ministries. We do provide transportation. We actually had the opposite. We found that many kids were coming, and particularly in our New Canadian, we were there to pick up like an actual family who had signed up through the church to be like, I can't make it, like drive myself. But then they were bringing like half the building with them. So we had a big issue with kids just being dropped off because parents weren't ready, because they do like 2 or 3 routes. So we had to start putting like, no, a 16-year-old adult has, or a 16-year-old person has to come with you. But I think that when they ask that, like, do they need transportation and that kind of stuff, it's not so much like, I want to come to church. I know you guys, like, I think that that's a different kind of transportation in terms of like, we have youth who can't get themselves to our youth group and they want to come, they have a heart to come, they've asked to come, but their parents can't drive them on Friday nights. They work, they only have one vehicle, their parent can't drive. And as I said, our bus system is really rotten, and that would look at like a 3-hour bus ride just to get like what would take a 15-20 minute drive. So like I think in those cases, then that's what we need to be assessing. Like we have definitely been as a church assessing, like, how do we get our youth, and then how do we get their siblings, because their siblings want to come but parents are working, or they don't have means to get them there. And so I think that also needs to come when we think about that stuff.
One of the things that we have done to kind of meet the needs of the community and get to know some of the needs in the community is we don't hold a VBS because I don't have the attention span for a VBS and do 2 camps and all the things. But we'll do things throughout the summer. Anytime our city does something, we're there. We will also do like water balloon fights in the park and just provide just a bunch of water balloons and, right there by the swimming pool. So as kids are dropped off to go to the swimming pool, they'll go do a water fight and then go swimming, or leave, just all the different variations on how that could work. But we'll also do things like a bike day And we will have inner tubes and chains and all of the things that a kid might need to repair their bike, and they can bring their bike in and we will just repair their bike for them and get to know them. Our church is like in the middle of downtown, and it's a pretty small town where kids like tend to walk around a lot. And we're right next to a pizza parlor, and then across the street is like the ice cream place. So there's a fair amount of traffic. So that tends to work out well. But one of the best things that we did last year was partner with Uncle Charlie with his Carlitos Be Brave Monkey. And we did a 9-month offering thing for him. So throughout those 9 months, we watched videos of different kids who received Carlitos, and I would track it like on Facebook when he would say, oh, I sent out Carlitos to all these places. We would add like little pins to the map. But then I had pictures of like all of the schools and all of the places where like the homeschool kids go on a regular basis. And, just had them start looking like who needs Carlitos in these places that we go. And the way that his ministry is set up is that for every $25 that you raise, you get a Carlitos monkey for your ministry. And so we've been able to hand out a lot of Carlito monkeys to kids who, are either entering foster care or whatever, because they talk to kids. Kids talk to kids, and they have conversations with kids that they wouldn't necessarily have with a grown-up. And so it's really kind of opened our eyes into specific ways that we can even just pray for our community and offer a Carlitos Be Brave Monkey with a little app for the kids to download and play video games. And he's got like all of his worship videos and all of that stuff on there too. So it's really turned out to be a really cool resource for our church, and it's really shifted the mindset of the kids too, as far as who can I invite and who can I give Carlitos to and how can we pray.
I've heard of that ministry before. That's really cool. I've seen people do different things with the monkeys too. All right, question 3 here. Pastor Tracy and her children's ministry team took personal responsibility for everything that impacted their ministry, reaching unchurched families, getting children to events, teaching them how to behave, taking care of expenses, and inspiring them to learn and grow closer to God. Is this sense of ownership part of the culture of your ministry? If so, explain. And we have 10 minutes to do it. I'll start with mine. We just this year started kids participating in service, meaning like they're my door greeters. They help with the worship team. They choose the music. They run the slides and the sound. So in a sense, I feel like that gives them ownership because they're in charge of the ministry, of that service. And they love participating in that way. I also really loved though how in this chapter, and I feel like they talked about in another chapter too, was a specific story about a boy who earned his trip, like the 8th grade trip or whatever. I really, really love that idea. I think it's super powerful because any kid can do that. And I like how they shared that too, like you, by you lessening a challenge or making it easier for someone is not really helping them. There are kids where we might have to make small adjustments due to a cognitive delay or something, but like the goal is to ultimately challenge them the same as others. Because their sense of accomplishment when they're done with that task is huge. And as I read that chat, like the end of the chapter here about that story, about the boy who they were willing to fly back to go to Disneyland, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I can just envision him on stage when he completed that, just how proud he had to have been in that moment. He didn't let these things stop him, like just how powerful and probably life-changing for him too, that someone not only believed in him, they encouraged him and they followed through on what was promised. So I really love that. And I hope that's something I can incorporate in my ministry soon. I don't know how or what, but I think that's a really, really great way to give your kids ownership.
Yeah, I think one of the things that our ministry does really well is give kids ownership. We've really transitioned to like a children's ministry, it's done by kids for kids. And so the only thing that our leadership team really does at all is salvate like eternity type issues. So they share the Bible adventure and they lead the altar service, but kids lead worship. They're the ushers, they're the greeters, they're all the things within children's ministry. But on the flip side of that, the adults in our service, they pray for our kids and they talk to our kids and they, and they're, constantly, I'm always giving them vocabulary and things that they can do and say when it comes to family members that they have that don't go to church, on how they can explain who we are and what we do. And so I think for our ministry context, it's not just the kids that have ownership in the ministry, it's the entire church that has ownership in the ministry. And it's been a really cool thing to see happen.
If there are no other thoughts, I'm gonna fast forward to number 4 here. It says nearly all of the children's ministries in our trauma study held regular midweek events and summer camps. However, in many other churches, these types of events are reserved for children in the youth ministry. Why is this? How can we help parents and church leadership to think outside the box when it comes to children's ministry events? I don't know if it's a territory thing or I don't know what, but like we have midweek services and things, and we constantly have events for kids. Now camps, like we have one camp that our kids attend in the summer that they go to. But outside of that, like we just don't do a camp, but like we have VBS and everything. So I personally didn't feel like this question applied to me, but I didn't know if it was different where you guys are, if you have a different outlook on it.
I'm recently learning that, or not recently, but I've been kind of through the Facebook page learning that in the States, many of you run your own camps. Like you are responsible for taking and finding, and oh my goodness, we have summer camps to do that for us. They hire their own staff. They do everything all summer, and it's all the way. Some of our camps are we have like multiple, like where churches support our camps, but we don't, outside of giving them money, we don't really have to do much surrounding that. But our kids can go to camp all the way from like 6, I think, depending on where they want to go, to 18. And within those camps, they have like leadership and all that stuff. I think when I think of like the difference between youth and kids is I think about their maturity level and how personally I really don't like, I think of some, like I was reading recently, someone was doing a lock-in or something with their grade 5, 6s. And I think hats off to you. I don't know that I can lock myself in a church for that long with grade 4, 5s. Like I love them, they're amazing, but the energy and all of that would be required. Yeah, that would be probably the big reason why I think our youth get to do things like that, is they have a maturity and they also have a bigger sense of independence, and they enjoy hanging around and talking, or they'll create their own game. Whereas with the younger kids, you have to like plan like all ridiculously long hours of all of that. And so I think for me, that's why I don't do it. I've thought about like, oh, I could do a retreat. And I was like, but they require a lot more like monitoring. You can't just be like, oh, they're going to get up and go to the bathroom and come back, because they could be scared of going to the bathroom and coming back. They could get lost. They could forget that that's what they were actually doing. They could, the what ifs are, yeah.
I just think of the movie Up, squirrel, like that would be them going to the bathroom or coming back. I actually,
So at our,
oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry, Jody.
Go ahead.
At our church, we send a group of kids to a camp every April. It's called Retreat 4-6, and it's a whole weekend for kids who are in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, but the camp does everything. Like, all I have to do is send chaperones for the number of kids we're sending. And those kids from our church, they're totally welcome to invite friends to go with them. We don't reserve it, just you have to attend Valley. If you want to invite a friend to come, you can do that. And the same goes for our youth group, our middle school, high school. We have a camp, they have a camp that they go to every summer. And it's actually, the person who owns it is the uncle of a couple in our church. And so the youth group they will plan that camp. It's like Thursday to Sunday, and they'll take leaders adults from the church to go with the group of teenagers. But again, it's not reserved just for our youth group. It's available. You want to invite a friend? Hey, invite a friend. They're more than welcome to come. So yeah, we don't have midweek events. We don't host a camp, but there's a camp that kids can go to if they'd like to, but that's up to the parents to send their kids to that camp. Yeah, as far as like events and stuff, we always, no, not always, most of the time have good volunteer support from people in the church who aren't typically involved with like the weekly children's ministry. Like, our volunteer pool for VBS includes teenagers up till like 70-year-old women that sit at the table and greet the kids every night and put their wristbands on and all that kind of stuff. So we get a good pool of volunteers for those kinds of things. I don't feel like our children's ministry events are exclusive. The only one that would be a little exclusive would be the date nights that I do, 4 date nights a year, Valentine's, and then 3 in the summer, one each June, July, August. And those are reserved for families that come to church here. We don't open it up, hey, bring a friend. But I have been considering whether or not I should say to parents, hey, do you want to go out? If you want to go out to dinner with your neighbor and they have kids that need a babysitter, their kids are more than welcome to come with your kids to our date night events. But I'm going on sabbatical this summer, so that'll have to wait until next year for me to implement that idea if parents are up for it.
I love that idea. I think that's a really good idea. But yeah, I'm gonna just piggyback on what Kristen had to say. Like, there's just a certain maturity level that we used to have a Sunday night service for our kids. And that didn't really go super well, but we did start doing a thing to where once you're in 5th grade, you have 2 years of a transition phase between kids church and youth group. And so when you're in 5th grade, you can go to youth group. You can't go to youth camp yet, because youth camp is strictly 6th grade. But it at least gives them a couple years to kind of find their footing and kind of navigate the difference between kids church and youth group for our 5th and 6th graders. And then we have 2 camps that we do here. One is 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and then then if your parents volunteer, then you get to go and do kids camp with me. And then there's one in July too for ages 6 to 18.
I just can't imagine going to camp at 6 years old. My kids probably would. They're super independent, but I think I would be a nervous wreck as a parent sending my 6-year-old to camp. But maybe that's just me.
I have definitely done it, but I did it based on my kids. Like, my son was not quite there, whereas my daughters are like, yes, please let us go. We want to go and meet people and have a sleepover someplace other than home. And it was, it's very small. Like, I think they only went to camp for like 2 nights, and
Okay.
we do like a 1 night. So it's just like a one kind of that, like, get your feet wet, experience the fun, but don't really have the opportunity to miss mom and dad too much.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I can't imagine a whole week. My daughter would fall apart. But I think a night or 2, she would totally be down for that. She'd be like, peace out, mom, bye. So
yeah. So to make it even like more crazy, the camp that does ages 6 to 18 is out in the middle of nowhere, and there is no cell phone service.
oh my word.
None. Like, there there's nothing. And so we had like all of these kids that were like having severe meltdowns because they couldn't have access to, like, literally no access to your phone. And it just, it was horrible.
All right, well, we gotta wrap it up for today. It's now 2:32. So just some things for next week. We don't have next week in preparation for Easter. I will be praying for all of you, because if your schedule's anything like mine, it's just insanity. Praying for your Good Friday services and Easter. And then we meet up the following week, and we have 2 chapters to cover, chapters 9 and 10. I might just kind of like pick ahead of time certain questions we go over. That way we're not stuck on one chapter and not get to the other. Also, if you have any questions that you can think of, something that really stuck out to you, make sure to post them in the group for me in the next week or so as well. That way I can send them to the author ahead of time. For example, I don't know if you guys remember back in chapter 2 or 3, I think it was, we got stuck on a question, the whole sin versus trauma, for like a super long time. Great discussions, but I wrote that down as one of the things I want to bring up to the author. So if you have anything in particular you'd like to ask, shoot it to me ahead of time. Not saying you can't ask anything live, you totally can, but you know, just to give them an idea of where we're coming from. So yeah, any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
It'd be really cool if they could give us a list of other ideas as far as events as and what they think would be good and helpful, or in just the post 2020 world.
As in like events to host for families? Okay.
Yeah. And even if they've seen a difference like in trauma with like separation anxiety or anything with, how 2020 has changed trauma for kids.
I'm sure the answer to that would be it's increased. We have one girl who hasn't experienced like any like physical or mental trauma, but since COVID, it just breaks my heart. She hates when mom leaves, like just for the 1 hour class, she just has a melt. It's heartbreaking. So, but I think that's a great question. And then how to address that, because it's so different than someone being physically or, verbally abused. Like we all went through this and it was very traumatic. So I think that's a great question.
I think it's like its own category of trauma.
Seriously, they probably could write a whole book on it. Sadly.
Can we ask questions, or would we rather we type them in at Facebook?
Type them on Facebook. That way I
Okay.
can write them all down after the fact and send it to them. So, all right. Does anybody want to close in prayer for us today?
I can.
All right. Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we've had together to think deeply about how we do ministry, and especially to children who have come from a trauma background. Thank you for the Crosbys and the work they've done, the research for this book, and how it's making us think and reevaluate how we can best minister to children and families, and just show them your love, and have that be the thing that is engaging about us and that makes families and children want to come and find out what it is that we have to offer, which is you. And so I thank you for this time together. As we come up upon Easter week, I know this is a busy time for all of us. Pray that you would bless all of our ministries, bless the work of our hands and establish it. And maybe we just have a wonderful time together with our kids and their families and our church families, celebrating your resurrection and remembering your death on the cross. And just bless our week in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Mary Lou.
No
All right,
problem.
guys. I hope you have a great week and happy Easter.